My name's Tristan Woods. I am a senior Power Platform developer at Omnidata, which is now called Fresh Solutions. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to spend a little bit of time in PowerPoint. I don't love PowerPoint, so I only have 3 slides, and I'm going to talk about a little bit of some of these Fabric tools that are very cool and kind of allow people to do more with data without necessarily being like coding experts. So this is some of the reasons I like working in Fabric. If you are an expert coder and know Python and SQL super well, maybe some of this stuff isn't as exciting. But if you're kind of one of those people that sort of, you know a little bit about coding, but you're not necessarily a developer, and so you have ideas about what can be done, but then actually doing them and some of this stuff has maybe historically been a blocker for you to kind of move things along with the analytics that you're creating. So I'm going to talk about a Lakehouse. I'm going to talk about creating a shortcut, and then I'm going to jump into Fabric, and I'm going to create a Lakehouse and a shortcut and kind of demonstrate what some of these cool features are. So the first part that we're talking about is a Lakehouse. And a Lakehouse is cool because it's a storage layer that can handle structured and unstructured data. Mm-hmm. What this means is you can use any data file that you can find. You can probably upload it to Fabric in some way, shape, or form. What's nice about the tables is that they're very structured. They have to be in the Delta format. And this allows kind of the use of Apache Spark and some other kind of processing tools that allow you to work with large amounts of data. So that's tables. It's good to have structured tables, right? But sometimes we have unstructured data, and that's where we can take files and anything that we can think of, we can load as a file. One example that's very, very common is if you have kind of a really messy spreadsheet that's kind of in a matrix format, not really a data table, you could bring that in as a file. You could use some of the transformation tools within Fabric to convert it to kind of a data table format that could be processed as a Delta format, and then convert it and serve it up to your table section so that you could use it in your analytics, mainly like a semantic model that you'd use in Power BI. Well, like I said, I am not necessarily like a coding genius. I don't know lots of Python or how to kind of break down stuff in code. But in Fabric, I know how I can take unstructured data, use the tools in Fabric, and end up with structured data that I can use in areas where I am a little better, which is kind of building data models in Power BI and building kind of useful visuals in Power BI. The next thing I want to talk about is the shortcut. So the shortcut is a data ingestion method available in Fabric you're not duplicating source data. You're only creating a reference to the original source. So if you have data saved in AWS or Google Cloud or even Azure Storage Gen 2, you may not want lots of people duplicating these large data tables just to kind of play around with. That could be problematic. But it might be nice to give people access to kind of incorporate that large data set into other things they're doing without duplicating it. And that's essentially what a shortcut does. There's lots of security available in Fabric. It is a joy to deal with. Kind of once you understand a few things about it, it's not so bad, but there's lots of different ways that things can be secured and at many different points. So shortcuts can be secured in a way that's very, very useful for making sure the data doesn't accidentally get out to people it's not supposed to. There's some technical marvel in these things that have been created by Microsoft. But what I've done is just kind of put it in language that helped me understand what these things were once I started using it. Because if you're like me, when Fabric first came out, it's kind of like, what even is Fabric? But as I started using it, some of these things it became very apparent that these are great tools and that there's a lot of ways that I can use this. We're going to navigate to app.powerbi.com. This is kind of the easiest way to get to Fabric once you're in Fabric. We can see sort of a screen that I think you've all seen before. I'm not going to go too much into this part. So what I am going to do is I'm going to create a workspace because we need a Fabric capacity workspace to kind of leverage Lakehouses to ingest data using a shortcut. So I'm going to create a new workspace. And I'm going to my workspace rocks. Okay. That's a terrible name, but it gets the job done. I've created a workspace. And now what we want to do is I'm going to drag that up just so we can see the objects that we create here. So we're now in a workspace. And to confirm that it's a fabric capacity workspace, you have to go to this workspace settings and in license info, you need to confirm that the license configuration says fabric capacity and large semantic model storage format. If either of those aren't true, you want to go to this edit section. You may or may not have the ability to update to fabric capacity, because basically by using fabric, you have the ability to kind of consume cloud compute, and cloud compute costs money. So as you get access to fabric capacity, they don't want just everyone going all willy-nilly. So generally, this is kind of tightened down by most organizations. So you may have to request this. The same thing with kind of where the license capacity is coming from, and then the semantic model storage format. So if you don't have access to do this, I would imagine there is an administrator of types in your organization that could accomplish this for you. So once we have our workspace kind of confirmed that it's fabric capacity, we hit new item. There's lots of items. I have my favorites selected, but there's all these different items for visualizing data, getting data, storing data, preparing data. It's all very cool. I only use some of them, so I just favorite them. And then when I log in, it just shows me the things that I care about. So like I said, Lakehouse, and this is the coolest Lakehouse. With the create it. And what happens is it takes us right in there we're in the Lakehouse. There's two components to the Lakehouse. One of them is the Lakehouse itself. In here, you can kind of see your data. You can choose ways to ingest data. You can create semantic models with the data you brought in. You can leverage notebooks. So if you've ever worked with Databricks or anything like that, you can do similar things here in the notebooks. That's the Lakehouse tab, and it's this little house with the waves next to it. And we also have our SQL Analytics endpoint. When I select that, what you see is that we've moved from our Lakehouse into our SQL Analytics endpoint. And basically what you can do here, I don't have anything in my Lakehouse, but you can run SQL queries, and you can get a connection string that will allow you to connect to third-party applications. The main ones that I've connected to are Tabular Editor or SQL Server Management Studio, SSMS. So that is just a high level kind of what a Lakehouse looks like, the two components to it. And there's a couple different ways you can switch back and forth. As you open objects, you kind of get a navigation bar over here, or you can use this drop down to go back to your Lakehouse. We want to get data and so there's a couple different ways to do this, and I'm just talking about them really quickly. If you just had a file that you need to upload and is kind of a one-time thing or something you didn't need a great process around, like kind of maintaining or managing, you have this upload file section. You have a data pipeline. So if you've ever worked with ADFS pipelines, this is with a very similar, dare I say identical. It's not identical, but if you're like me, you might not notice some of the differences. Dataflow Gen 2, this is really, really cool. We're going to do a video about that a little later. But essentially, the Power Query Editor, if you've ever opened a PBIX file and kind of played around with the Power Query Editor in there, this is that. The main kind of upgrade you get here is, one, you're working in the cloud, so that gives you a little flexibility. But then also you get to choose where your data lands, kind of where when you're done transforming it. It doesn't just have to land in the Power BI file that you're working with, if we're looking at our PBIX example, but you can send it to a Lakehouse, you can send it to a file, you can send it many places, but that's what's cool about the Dataflow Gen 2. Event Stream is for real-time data. So if you are in a situation where you need real-time data, this is kind of the beginning of how you might start to do that. But what we're focusing on is the shortcut. And so I'm just going to click on that and very quickly go over kind of the options we have. We have internal sources. So anything saved in a Lakehouse in your tenant is an internal source. If you're looking at external sources, we have kind of the big ones you would expect in sort of the data game. We have AWS, Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, though kind of a Microsoft product, it's not considered an internal source for what we're doing. We have Dataverse, and then we have Google Cloud Storage. So I'm going to keep this simple and just use an internal source. And then I'm going to find so I have basically just typed in the workspace where some of this stuff lives. And so there are a lot of different Lakehouses here. But the way that I'm going to get to the one I want is we're just going to look at this and see that we have prod, dev, and test over here, these different workspaces. And then we have kind of with the base layer, with the curated layer, so I'm just going to take from my curated layer. So basically, if you're familiar with the medallion structure, you can have 3 different layers, kind of the bronze, silver, gold, or raw, base, curated. And when you're selecting data that you want to play around with, kind of for purposes of maybe creating a visual someday, you want to use the curated data because all the business process transformations the data engineers kind of inject into this data is already applied. If you need to do something exploratory where you're maybe wondering if some of the processes are breaking the data in some way, then you could look at the base or raw tables. In this case, we're just going to look at this Omni Analytics table, which is represents our curated layer. With the select next, and now what happens is kind of the objects that are available to me from this Lakehouse. And so I'm just going to grab with the company, customer, date, and I think there's fact, sales, and a fact table. I like sales posted transactions because those are invoiced sales. Okay, so I just grabbed a couple of dimension tables or categorical tables, and then a couple of and one transaction table or fact table. I grabbed a date table with the. So now what happens is sometimes the data you're bringing in, you don't want it to be named like a data engineer would want it named. You want it named like a business analyst might use it. And so you have the ability to just kind of do that here with the, so that you don't have to keep editing it at other points in the chain. This is sort of the first point where you're getting the data. So it's nice to just sort of make it clean for the end users. It's always a nice thing to do. Okay. Now what's happening is Fabric is going and looking at the location where this data is stored, that other lakehouse, and then it's just referencing it anytime you run a SQL query or try to run a transformation. It's not doing it against actual data in your lakehouse, but it is kind of looking as a source for the data in the original source, if that makes sense. Okay, so we see all my tables are there. This unidentified thing, it just kind of shows up when you're processing stuff when it's not quite done processing. And so we're just going to refresh that. So cool. We have data in here. What's nice about this, again, is we haven't written any data. You can tell because we have this little delta table symbol on our right. That's not the important part. The important part is this hyperlink up here to the left. This little hyperlink up here denotes that it's a shortcut. And it means there's no actual data living here. It's just referencing the source that we have selected. You could run queries if you wanted to use your SQL Analytics endpoint. What we're going to do is we're just going to create a new semantic model. Before I do that, I just want to quickly talk about files. So we've ingested via shortcut these kind of nice clean tables. If there was data that wasn't structured, that was living somewhere that you wanted to ingest via shortcut, think of like a messy Excel spreadsheet that was like a matrix instead of being like a data table format. You could bring that into your files, or you could create like a new data flow Gen 2 and point it at that file. You could transform it and then publish it as a table in your Lakehouse. That might not make a whole lot of sense, but basically you have access to grab both structured and unstructured data, and you have sort of mechanisms for kind of cleansing it, shaping it so that you can use it for your purposes. But once you've done that, then you can create a semantic model, and we'll call this with the model. Run down here to see your objects, and you see there's my tables. I'm just going to grab them all. I'm going to hit confirm. And then we should be navigated to the model page. If they're not, it'll show that a pop-up's blocked. Okay. I think it took us to the place that we want to be. So again, if you've worked in Power BI, this screen should be familiar for you. The kind of the modeling tab of Power BI, easiest way to get everything fit to page. And so we have our posted transactions, we have our company. So when creating relationships, you always want to go from your fact table to your dim table. And so I have this dim company key, and it creates the relationship, right? I can do that with customer, with the, and we're very quickly creating just a light model that can be consumed to create a Power BI visual. So we have the date key here, and in these tables, document date key is generally what we want. So I'm just going to grab that and put it on this date key. And now we have a very nice model. One of the other things you can do in here is you can add row level security. This model isn't set up for it. If you want to create your relationships in a different way, you could come in here and kind of interact with that screen that I sort of just glossed over. Sometimes I find dragging and dropping easier. Sometimes it's more difficult. If we brought in tables that we didn't mean to, or we didn't bring in tables that we were supposed to, we can go to this edit semantic model, and we could select or unselect them. We brought in data from one location via shortcut. You could bring in data from multiple locations via shortcut. This is a very, very simplified kind of demonstration, but just imagine if you had different lakehouses that contain different types of data and you wanted to marry them together. This is how you do that. You create shortcuts to the tables from the various lakehouses that you need, and then you'd use your modeling ability and maybe the transformation tools in Fabric to kind of tie those together so that you could ask and answer more complex questions. But now that we have a model, our semantic model saves and we can go back to our Workspace. We can go into our semantic model. This is kind of the semantic model page. If you need to get back to that open data model page, that's up here. Now it's moved me in this viewing, but I want editing. Once this is complete, let's just refresh it. Maybe that's what we need. Then you can create a report off of this. So I wonder we can create a report. So here, pick publish semantic. Okay. So generally there's a button where you can just push like create a report, but if you can't do that, you can go to your new item in your workspace and you can choose report, which I just did very quickly there. So once you do that, you can find the model that you created, and then you can either auto create a report or create a blank report. I'm just going to create a blank report. Auto create's pretty cool, but sometimes it doesn't always give you the information that you need. So now we have our company ID that we can put out here. Let's just bring profit in right. And so now we have this. You can create whatever you can think of using Power BI visuals, because you have a lot of the same functionalities you do in Power BI desktop. I think there's some things that aren't available, but as more stuff moves to the cloud, Microsoft is going to make the necessary features available in the online version. I can almost do everything that I need to in the cloud. There's a few things that I can't, that I still rely on Power BI desktop for. But what you can see is you have your report that you've created from the semantic model that you created from the data that you took from another lakehouse without duplicating any data. So there's really nothing data-wise living on your lakehouse. So your data footprint relatively small. When I want to publish it, report and you could put it in a folder if you wanted. I think that's a preview feature, but now your report's saved. This is beautiful, right? There's a lot more you could do. I'm just kind of showing the basics. And then when you go back to your workspace, you have your lakehouse, you have your SQL Analytics endpoint, you have the semantic model that you created from the objects that you brought into your lakehouse. And then you have the report that you created from your semantic model. Lineage-wise, you can kind of see how all that works out. This is the default semantic model. So when you create a lakehouse, you get a default semantic model. The default semantic model exists. I have not dove too much into what you can do with it. But in terms of creating reports, semantic models, lakehouses, shortcuts, that's what we've covered today. And hopefully you can begin to see like what a cool tool this is to allow kind of non-data engineer folks, maybe people closer to the business, to be able to grab the data they need and create things that help ask and answer more complex questions.